morning, everyone! Good morning, good morning. Sorry, I'm still fixing up sound settings. Good morning, everyone! Hello! Hi! Good morning! Welcome, welcome! It is a beautiful Tuesday morning. I am late. I am aware that I am late. I'm late. I got caught up in a bunch of stuff behind the scenes. I woke up kind of late but early. Early but late. I decided I'm gonna take a shower, I'm gonna clean up a little bit, I'm gonna make a big breakfast for myself because I was actually pretty hungry. Lost track of time, started chatting on Discord, lost track of time, and now here I am. And it's story time. It's story time. We're gonna continue. Hold on. I hope the music's alright. I hope the music is alright. Oh, I'm peeking already. I'm still trying to figure out my sound settings because I realized in the karaoke stream, I blew out all your eardrums, and I am so sorry for that. I wish somebody had told me that I was being way too loud. You guys gotta look out for me, y'all. You guys gotta look out for me when I'm blowing out eardrums. I can't be blowing up everyone's eardrums like that, then I won't be having anyone to follow me anymore. I'm a little out of sorts. Just give me a moment. I have the book right here in front of me. I'm all out of sorts this morning, don't mind me. There's a lot of stuff happening, in my personal life right now, so a lot of stuff. Why am I making excuses? There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, so I woke up today a little flustered, a little crazy. But let's get into it. Okay, last time we left off, we got introduced to Matt, the main character of our story. Oh yeah, this is the House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farber. Last left off, we met Matt, our main character. We found out that he was a clone, and that the family of the patriarch of whom he was cloned from all think he's a disgusting animal because by their laws, clones are not humans. And I guess this takes place in a future where clones and stuff, are made and stuff and things. All that fun mumbo jumbo stuff. How the heck did my case get a big old gash in it? How did that happen? Oh, was my cat trying to chew on it again? Gosh darn it. Oh, anyway, that's why I have the case. Alright, so we're gonna continue. Chapter 8. The Egypt in the Dry Field. Oh yeah, last we left off with Matt is that he was taken into prisoner, basically treated badly for like 6 months, and then kind of went selectively mute because of the trauma. And now he regained his ability to talk after a big old temper tantrum, because he's like 6 or 7 years old. But yeah, so now he's able to talk, and now we're gonna continue from where we last left off. I'm all over the place today. Don't mind me! I'm full of beans. I had coffee this morning. I'm all over the place. Okay. Chapter 8. Egypt in the Dry Field. Matt was wildly excited. Not only were they going on a picnic, but they would travel by horseback. Matt had seen horses from the window of the little house, and of course he'd seen them on TV. Cowboys and big, tough banditos rode them. His favorite hero was El Tigre Negro, the Black Whip. El Tigre Negro was on TV every Saturday. He wore a black mask and rescued poor people from evil capitalists. His favorite weapon was a long whip in which he could peel an apple while it was still in the tree. Matt was more than a little disappointed when Tomlin brought out a sleepy gray horse instead of the spirited steed El Tigre Negro rode. "Be reasonable, lad," said the bodyguard, tightening the girth on the saddle. "We're after reliability, not speed. El Patron wouldn't take it at all well if you were dumped on your head." Once Matt was perched on the saddle in front of Tomlin, he forgot all about his disappointment. He was riding. He was high in the air, swaying along with the smell of horse all around him. He felt the coarse hair of the mane and pressed his ankles against the warm coat of the animal. After all those months without talking, Matt couldn't wait to catch up. He chatted about everything he saw: the blue sky, the birds, the flies buzzing around the horse's ears. Tomlin didn't stop him. He grunted occasionally to show he was listening, and directed the horse along a dirt path. They plodded through the poppy fields and gradually moved away from the big house towards the great brown hills that lay on the horizon. The first field they encountered were covered with a mist of new leaves. These were the seedlings. Matt had watched the growing cycle from the window of the little house, and he knew what to expect. The older plants were larger and rounder, like small cabbages, and the leaves were tinged with blue. As they rode, the plants became larger until they were as high as the belly of the horse. Buds opened into crinkled petals and a glory of white under the hot sun. A faint perfume hung in the air. They came to fields where the petals had fallen. These laid in drifts all around the ground, while the seed pods they left behind stuck up like green thumbs. The pods had swelled until they were the size of a hen's egg and ready for harvest. Matt saw the first farm laborers. He observed them before, but Celia had warned him to hide from strangers, so he hadn't watched them closely. Now he saw that both men and women wore tan uniforms and wide straw hats. They walked slowly, bending down with tiny knives to slash the pods. "Why are they doing that?" Matt asked. "To release the opium," replied Tomlin. "The sap oozes out and hardens overnight. In the morning, the workers scrape it off. They can collect from the same plant 4 or 5 times." On and on the horses plodded. The fields shimmered with heat, and a sweet odor with something rotten at its core filled the air. The workers bent and slashed in a hypnotic rhythm. They didn't speak. They didn't even wipe the sweat off their faces. "Don't they get tired?" Mac asked. "Oh, aye, they do," said Tomlin. At last the horse came to a deserted field. The plants were beginning to dry. A hot breeze rattled the leaves. "Look! There's a man lying on the ground!" cried Matt. Tomlin halted the horse and got down. "Stay," he ordered the animal. Matt clung tightly to the mane. He didn't feel at all safe so far off the ground. Tomlin strode over to the man, bent down and felt his neck. He shook his head and returned. Can't we help him?" faltered Matt. "It's too late for that poor soul," grunted the bodyguard. "What about the doctor?" "I told you it's too late. Do you want to get your ears cleaned?" Tomlin hoisted himself back onto the saddle and ordered the horse to go on. Matt looked back, tears stinging his eyes. The man was quickly hidden by the poppy plants. Why was it too late? Matt wondered. The man must be terribly hot, lying as he was in the full sun. Why couldn't they stop and give him water? Matt knew they had water. He could hear it sloshing in Tomlin's backpack. "We could go back," Matt began again. "Damn it!" roared the bodyguard. He halted the horse and sat for a moment, breathing hard. Matt looked at the ground and wondered whether he had the nerve to jump off if Tomlin really lost his temper. "I forget. Kids your age don't know anything," said Tomlin at last. "The man is dead. Heat or lack of water killed him. The cleanup crew at the end of the day will find him." The horse moved on. Matt had even more questions now, but he was too unsure of Tomlin's temper to ask them. Why hadn't the man gone home when he got sick? Why hadn't the other workers helped him? Why was he being left behind? Why was he being left out there like a piece of trash? Hold on. There we go. There we go. There we can hear the music better. Yeah? Yeah. All the while they were riding a long range of hills that bordered the fields. Now they turned off into a dry stream bed that led into the hills. Tomlin got down and led the horse under a cliff, where it would have shade. Nearby was a trough and a pump, which he worked vigorously to bring up the water. The horse was sweating. Its eyes watched the trough but didn't move. "Drink," said Tomlin. The horse trotted forward and dipped its muzzle. It blew noisy bubbles as it drank ravenously. We'll walk the rest of the way." "Can we take the horse?" said Matt, looking doubtful at the stream bed sneaking into the hills. "It wouldn't obey. It's programmed to stay on the farm." "I don't understand." "It's a safe horse, which means it has an implant in its head. It won't bolt or jump. It won't even drink unless you tell it to." Matt digested the idea for a moment. "Not even if it was very thirsty?" he said at last. It was thirsty now, said Tomlin. If I hadn't told it to drink, it would have stood in front of the trout until it died. Stay, he told the horse. Sorry for my terrible Scottish accent. I'm so terrible. I probably should stop. I'm going to stop doing the accent. I'm sorry. It's terrible. It's terrible. I'm not great at accents. I'm sorry. Shouldering a backpack, he started up the dry stream. Matt scrambled after him. At first the way wasn't difficult, but soon it was blocked by boulders that they had to climb. Matt wasn't used to exercise, and he quickly found himself out of breath. He didn't stop, though, because he was afraid Tomlin would leave him behind. Finally, the bodyguard heard him gasping and turned back. He hunted through the backpack. Here, drink some water. Have a bite of beef jerky, too. The salt will do you good. Matt devoured the beef jerky. It tasted wonderful. Not much farther, laddie. You're doing very well for a hothouse plant. They came to a giant boulder that seemed to block the trail until Matt saw a round hole in the middle. It was worn smooth like the hole in a donut. Tomlin climbed through and reached back to help Matt. The scene on the other side was completely unexpected. Creosote bushes and palo verde trees framed a small narrow valley, and in the center of this was a pool of water. At the far end, Matt saw an enormous grapevine sprawled over a man-made trellis. In the water itself, Matt saw shoals of little brown fish that darted away from his shadow. This is what you call an oasis, said Tomlin, throwing down his backpack and taking out food for the picnic. Not bad, huh? Not bad, agreed Matt, accepting a sandwich. I found this place years ago when I first started working for El Patron. The Alacrans don't know about it. If they did, they'd run a pipe in here and take out all the water. I hope I could count on you to keep the secret. Matt nodded, his mouth full of sandwich. Don't tell Maria either. She can't help blabbing. Okay, said Matt, proud that Tomlin considered him responsible enough to keep a secret. Oh gosh, excuse me. I brought you here for 2 reasons, said the bodyguard. 1, because it's nice. And 2, because I want to tell you a few things without being spied on. Matt looked up, surprised. You never know who's listening to you in that house. You're too young to understand much, and I wouldn't say anything if you were a real boy. Tomlin tossed breadcrumbs into a pool. Little fish rose to the surface to feed. But you're a clone, he went on. You haven't got anyone to explain things to you. You're alone in a way real humans can't understand. Even orphans can look at pictures and say, that's me ma and that's me da. Am I a machine? Matt blurted out. Machine? Oh, no. Then how was I made? Tomlin laughed. If you were a real boy, I'd tell you to go ask your big brother that tricky little question. Well, lad, the best way to describe is this. A long, long time ago, some doctors took a piece of skin from El Patron. They froze it so it would keep. Then, about 8 years ago, they took a bit of that skin and grew it into a whole new El Patron. Only they had to start at the beginning with a baby. That was you. That was me? Said Matt. It was. So I'm just a piece of skin? Now I've gone and upset you, said Tomlin. The skin is what you might call a photograph. All the information was there to grow a real copy. Skin, hair, bones, and a brain. Of a real man. You're exactly like El Patron when he was 7 years old. Matt looked down at his toes. That's all he was. A photograph. They put that piece of skin into a special kind of cow. You grew inside, and when the time came, you were born. Only, of course, you didn't have a father or a mother. Tom said I was puked up by a cow, said Matt. Tom's a filthy little pustule, said Tomlin. And so is the rest of that family. If you quote me, I'll deny it. He brought out a bag of trail mix and passed it to Matt. To continue, being a clone, you're different and a lot of people are afraid of you. They hate me, Matt said simply. Aye, some do. Tomlin stood up and stretched his big muscles. He paced back and forth on the sand when they were having their picnic. He hated to sit still for long. But some love you. Speaking of Maria, and of course Celia. And El Patron. Ah, well. El Patron's a special case. To be honest, the number of people who love you is small and the number who hate you is large. They can't get around the fact that you're a clone. It makes it hard to send you to school. I know, Matt thought bitterly of Maria. If she really loved him, she'd take him She'd take him with her and not care about how the other kids felt. El Patron insists that you be educated and live, as nearly as possible, a normal life. The problem is, no private teacher wants to teach a clone, and so the Alacrans got an Egypt. Matt was startled. He had heard the word so often, mostly from Maria. He thought it was only a swear word like dum-dum or cootie face. An Egypt is a person or animal with an implant in its head, said Tomlin. Like the horse, said Matt, as a terrible thought occurred to him. Correct. Egypts can only do simple things. They pick fruit or sweep floors or, as you've seen, harvest opium. The farm workers are Egypts, cried Matt. That's why they work without resting until the foreman orders them to stop, and why they don't drink water unless someone tells them to. Matt's thoughts were whirling. If the horse could stand there and die in front of the trough of water, then the man... The man, he said out loud. You're bright as a button, lad, said Tomlin. The man we saw on the ground probably lagged behind the other workers and didn't hear the foreman to tell them to stop. He might have worked all night getting thirstier and thirstier. Stop! Shrilled Matt. He covered his ears. This was horrible. He didn't want to know anymore. Tomlin was at his side at once. That's enough lessons for one day. We're on a picnic and we haven't had any fun yet. Come on, I'll show you a beehive and a coyote den. Everything lives around the water in the desert. They spent the rest of the day exploring the burrows, the crevices, the hidden layers of the secret valley. Tomlin might not have gone to school for too long, but he knew a great deal about nature. He taught Matt to sit still and wait for things to come to him. He told him how to tell the movement of a beehive by its hum. He pointed out droppings and tracks and bone fragments. Finally, as shadows began to fill up the oasis, Tomlin helped Matt climb through the hole in the rock and returned to the horse. It was waiting exactly where they'd left it. Tomlin ordered to take another drink before they set off. The fields were empty, and the long shadows of the hills flowed across the land. Where they ended, the late afternoon sun made the poppies glow with a golden light. They passed the dry field where the man's body had lain, but it was gone. Teacher was an Egypt, said Matt, breaking the silence. She was one of the brighter ones, said Tomlin. Even so, she could only do one lesson over and over. Will she come back? No, the bodyguard sighed. They'll put her to work mending curtains or peeling potatoes. Let's talk about something more cheerful. Could you teach me? Asked Matt. Tomlin let out a billow of genuine laughter. I could if you want to learn how to break desks with karate chops. I reckon you'll do your schooling off the TV. I'll be around to hang you out the window by I'll be around to hang you out by the window. I'll be around to hang you out by the window by your ankles if you don't study. Chapter 9, The Secret Passage. Excuse me. On the surface, Matt's life settled into a pleasant rhythm. He studied via distance learning over the TV. Tomlin set off to homework and came back with excellent grades, and Celia praised Matt lavishly. Maria praised him too when she visited. It didn't hurt either that Tom had lousy grades and managed to stay in boarding school only because Mr. Alarcon sent the headmaster a large donation. But underneath, Matt felt a hollowness. He understood that he was only a photograph of a human, and that meant he wasn't really important. Photographs could lie forgotten in drawers for years. They could be thrown away. At least once a week, Matt dreamed of the dead man in the field. The man's eyes were open and staring up at the sun. He was terribly, horribly thirsty. Matt could see how dusty his mouth was. There was no water anywhere, only the dry, rattling poppies. It got so bad that Matt demanded a pitcher of water by his bed. If only he could take that pitcher into his dreams. If only he could dream it in there and pour the water into the man's dusty lips, but he couldn't. And when he woke up, he drank glass after glass to get rid of the dry, dead feeling of the poppy fields. Then, of course, he had to go to the bathroom. On such occasions, Matt would tiptoe past Celia's bedroom. He could hear her snores, and across the hall, Tomlin's thunderous reply. The shudder made him feel safe, but Matt never knew, just before he opened the bathroom door, whether the dead man might be lying on the other side, staring up at the big bright light in the middle of the ceiling. Maria started bringing Furball on her visits. He was a shrill, rat-sized dog that forgot its house training whenever he got excited. Tomlin often threatened to suck him and the mess he left up the vacuum cleaner. "He'd fit," he'd growl over Maria's horrified protests. "Trust me, he'd fit." What Matt hated about the creature was everyone's assumptions that he and Furball were the same. It didn't matter that Matt had excellent grades and good manners. They were both animals and thus unimportant. During Easter vacation, Tom said good manners were no harder to learn than rolling over or playing dead. Matt threw himself at him, and Maria ran shrieking for Tomlin. Tom was sent to his room without dinner. Matt wasn't punished at all. Which was okay with Matt, except that Furball wasn't punished for his crimes either. He couldn't understand the difference between right and wrong. He was a dumb beast, and so, apparently, was Matt. When Maria wasn't visiting, Matt amused himself by exploring the house. He pretended he was a Latigo Negro, scouting out an enemy fortress. He had a black cape and a long, thin leather belt for a whip. He skulked behind curtains and furniture, and hid if he saw one of the Alacrans in the distance. Felicia, Benito Stevens, and Tom's mother, played the piano in the afternoons. Her crashing chords echoed from the music room. She attacked the piano with a fervor completely different from her usual sluggish self, and Matt liked to hide behind the potted plants to listen. Her fingers flew from one end of the keyboard to the other. Her eyes were closed and her mouth was pulled back into a grimace that wasn't pain, but something close to it. The music was wonderful, though. After a while, Felicia would run out of energy. Trembling and pale, she would hunch over the keys, and this was a signal for a servant to bring her a brown liquid in a beautiful, cut-glass bottle. The servant would mix a drink. Matt loved the clink of ice, and placed it in Felicia's hand. She would drink until the trembling stopped. Then she would roll over the piano like one of Celia's spinaches when Tomlin forgot to water her garden. Maids had to carry her away to her apartment. One day, Felicia didn't come at her usual time, and Matt hovered behind the potted plants as he worked up the courage to approach the piano. If she caught him, he knew he'd be banished from the room forever. His fingers tingled with the desire to play. It looked so easy. He could even hear the music in his head. Matt crept out of his hiding place. He reached out to touch the keys, and heard Felicia's listless voice in the hallway. She was telling a servant to bring her a drink. Matt panicked. He darted into the closet behind the piano and shut the door an instant before Felicia came into the room. She immediately started playing. Matt sneezed from all the dust in the closet, but Felicia was making too much noise to hear him. Matt felt around until he found the light switch. It was a disappointing place. Sheet music was stacked against the walls. A heap of folding chairs filled up one corner, and it was so covered with dust and spiderwebs that Matt sneezed again. He rolled up a sheet of music and began slipping off the inner wall, more for something to do than any real curiosity. On the inner wall, under a knot of webs that would have made Dracula happy, Matt found another light switch. He flipped it on. He recoiled against a heap of music when part of the wall slid open and threw up a cloud of dust that made him choke. He reached for the asthma inhaler Celia insisted he carried at all times. When the dust had settled, Matt saw a narrow, dark hallway. He peered around the corner. An empty passage stretched both to the left and to the right. But now Felicia had stopped playing the piano. Matt held very still, listening for the clink of ice in the glass. After a while, he heard the maids carry Felicia away. Matt flipped up the switch once more and saw, to his great relief, that the wall closed up again. He slipped out of the closet, leaving dusty footprints across the carpet, and was scolded by Celia when he saw the state of his clothes and hair. This was even better than an episode of El Tico Negro, thought Matt, hugging the secret to himself. This is a place that belonged to him alone. Not even Tomlin could find him if he wanted to hide. Slowly and carefully, if someone hits you with a dictionary, is it physical or verbal? That's a good one, not nice. That's a good one. Hello, welcome! Welcome to the stream. I am doing a story reading. We are reading The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. It's one of my favorite stories. It's quite good. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for being here. I hope you're enjoying the story. Slowly and carefully over the next few weeks, Matt explored his new domain. It seemed to snake between the inner and outer walls of the house. He found peepholes in the walls, but saw only empty rooms with chairs and tables beyond. Once he saw a servant dusting furniture. A few of the peepholes looked into dark closets like the one in the music room. Matt didn't understand until one day, while feeling his way along the passage, his hand struck against another switch. He flicked it on. The panel slid open just like the one in the music room. Matt's heart beat wildly. He could walk right into the closet. It was full of musty clothes and old shoes, but if he pushed them aside, he could get to the door on the other side. He heard voices. The doctor and Mr. Alacron were pleading with the third person whose replies were muffled. The doctor spoke harshly, bringing back bad memories to Matt. "Do it," Willem snarled. "You know you have to do it." "Please, father," said Mr. Alacron, gentler than Matt had ever heard him be. No, moaned Mr. Alacron's father. You will die without chemotherapy," his son begged. "God wants me to come. But I want you here," Mr. Alacron pleaded. "This is a place of shadow and evil." The old man was clearly becoming irrational. "At least get a new liver," Willem said in his harsh voice. "Leave me alone," wailed the old man. Matt retreated to the passageway and closed the opening. He didn't understand what the men were arguing about, but he knew what would happen if someone caught him listening. He'd be locked up. He might even be given back to Rosa. Matt made his way to the music room, and for a long time he didn't venture into the secret passage. He did, however, keep listening to Felicia's music. It was something that had gotten inside of him, and no matter how dangerous it was, he couldn't go long without hearing it. One afternoon, Matt was alarmed to see the doctor arrive with Felicia's drink instead of the servant. "Oh, Willem," she moaned as he mixed in the ice. "He doesn't talk to me anymore. He looks right through me as though I weren't there." "It's all right," said the doctor. "I'm here. I'll take care of you." He opened his black bag and took out a syringe. Matt held his breath. The doctor had given him a shot when he was sick, and he'd hated it. Matt watched, fascinated, as Felicia's arm was swabbed and the needles jammed in. Why didn't she cry out? Couldn't she feel it? Willem sat next to her and draped his arms around her shoulders. He remembered things Matt couldn't hear. It must have pleased Felicia, because she smiled and rested her head against the doctor's chest. After a while, he guided her from the music room. At once, Matt was out of his hiding place. He sniffed the glass and sampled its contents. Ugh! Tasted like rotten fruit. He spat it out at once. He listened carefully for footsteps outside the hall and sat down at the piano. He carefully pressed a key. The note rang softly in the music room. Matt was entranced. He tried other keys. They were all beautiful. He was so enchanted he almost didn't hear the servant coming down the hall, but fortunately he woke up soon enough to scuttle behind the potted plant. After that day, Matt studied the comings and goings of the servants, to work out when it was safe to visit the music room. Felicia never used it in the morning. In fact, she didn't get up until the afternoon and was active for only an hour or so then. Matt discovered he could recreate songs Celia sang to him, using one finger. Felicia used all 10, but he hadn't figured out how to do that yet. Even so, the ability to create music filled him with a joy too large to contain. He forgot where he was. He forgot he was a clone. The music made up for everything. The silent contempt of the servants, Stephen and Amelia's snubs, Tom's hatred. "So this is where you get to," said Tomlin. Matt swung around, almost tumbling off the bench. "Don't stop. You got a real talent there. Funny, I never thought of El Patron as being the musical type." Matt's heart was beating wildly. Was he going to be barred from the room? "If you're musical, he must be," said the bodyguard. But I guess he never had the time to study. Where he lived, they chopped up pianos for firewood. "Can you play?" asked Matt. "You must be joking. Look at these." Matt saw stubby fingers sprouting from large, awkward hands. Some of the fingers were crooked, as though they had been broken and healed again. "You could use one finger," he suggested. Tomlin laughed. "Music has to be in the head first, laddie. The good Lord passed me by when he was handing out talent. You've got it, though, and it'd be a shame not to use it. I'll talk to El Patron about finding you a teacher." This proved difficult. No human wanted to teach a clone, and no Egypt was smart enough. Finally, Tomlin found a man who had gone deaf and was desperate for work. It seemed odd to Matt that someone who couldn't hear or teach music, but so it was. Mr. Ortega felt it through his hands. He placed them on the piano as Matt practiced and caught every mistake. It wasn't long before Matt added musical ability to his growing list of accomplishments. He could read 10 years beyond his level, do math that left toddler bewildered and irritated, and speak both English and Spanish fluently. In addition, his art grew better by the day. He threw himself into studying everything that came before him. Matt could name all the planets, the brightest stars, and all the constellations. He memorized the name of the countries, their capitals, and their chief exports. He was in a rage to learn. He would excel, and then everyone would love him and forget that he was a clone. I forgot I muted myself to blow my nose. You're not bothering me at all that nice. You are perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. I hope that you're enjoying the story. I muted myself for a moment so I could blow my nose because I'm a little stuffy because of allergies. But no, I just hope you're enjoying the story, so don't you worry about interrupting me. I tend to look up at the chat every once in a while. You're fine. You're fine. I just hope you're enjoying the story. Let's see. Chapter 10. A Cat with 9 Lives. You're like a wild animal, complained Maria, as she stood at the doorway of Matt's room. You hide in here like a bear in a cave. Matt looked indifferently at the curtained window. He liked the safe, comfortable darkness. I am an animal, he replied. Once those words would have pained him, but he accepted his status now. I think you just like to wallow, said Maria, striding in to open the curtains and windows. Outside lay Celia's garden filled with stands of corn, tomato, beans, and peas. Anyhow, it's El Patron's birthday, and that means you better take that snarl off your face. Matt sighed. He could unnerve almost everyone by growling at them, but not Maria. She only laughed. Of course, he'd never dream of growling at El Patron. Of course, he never dreamed of growling at El Patron on those rare occasions when the old man visited. To do so would have been unthinkable. Each time, El Patron looked more frail and his mind seemed to be less in order. It broke Matt's heart to look at him. He loved El Patron. He owed everything to him. Matt could hardly remember those terrible days 3 years before, when he was kept in a pen with roaches for friends and old chicken bones for toys. But he knew he'd still be there, or buried under the floor by Rosa, if the old man hadn't rescued him. El Patron is 143 today, said Matt. Maria shivered. I can't imagine being that old. Celia said if they put that many candles on the cake, it would melt the paint off the walls. He was kind of strange the last time he was here, said Maria. That's one way to put it, thought Matt. El Patron had become so forgetful, he repeated the same sentence over and over again. Am I dead yet? He asked. Am I dead yet? And he held his hands before his face, studying each finger as though to reassure himself that he was still there. Are you ready? Cried Celia, rushing into the room. She made Matt turn and adjust the collar of his shirt. Remember, you're sitting next to El Patron tonight. Pay attention and answer all his questions. What if he's weird? Said Matt. He remembered answering the question, am I dead yet, over and over again last time the old man visited. Celia stopped fussing with the shirt and knelt before him. Listen to me, darling. If anything bad happens tonight, I want you to come straight to me. Come to the pantry behind the kitchen. What do you mean, bad? I can't say. Celia looked furtively around the room. Just promise me you'll remember. Matt thought it was hard to promise something like that. Nobody planned to forget. But he nodded. Oh, mi hijo, I do love you. Celia flung her arms around him and burst into tears. Matt was both startled and dismayed. What could have upset her so much? He saw Maria out of the corner of his eye. She was making a face that indicated how totally soppy she found all this display. That was Maria's favorite word recently. Soppy. She picked it up from Tom Lin. I promise, said Matt. Celia sat back abruptly and wiped her eyes with her apron. I'm a fool. What good would it do if you understood? It would only make things worse. She seemed to be talking to herself, and Matt watched her anxiously. Then she stood up and smoothed the wrinkles in her apron. Run along, chicos, and have fun at the party. I'll be in the kitchen serving up the best dinner you ever saw. You look wonderful, both of you. Like you stepped out of a movie. The old, confident Celia was back, and Matt was relieved. I have to get Furball from my room, said Maria after they left. Oh no, you can't take him to dinner. I can if I want. I'll hide him in my lap. Matt sighed. There was no point arguing with her. Maria took Furball everywhere. Tomlin complained that it wasn't a dog, but a hairy tumor growing out of her arm. He offered to take her to a doctor and have it removed. Tom was in Maria's room, and Furball was nowhere to be seen. You didn't let him out, cried Maria, as she looked under the bed. I never even saw him, said Tom, glaring at Matt. Matt glared back. Tom's bristly red hair was slicked down, and his fingernails were neat white crescents. Tom was always perfectly groomed for these occasions, and it earned him many admiring comments from the women who came to El Patron's birthday parties. He's lost, wailed Maria. He gets so scared when he's lost. Oh, please help me find him. Reluctantly, Tom and Matt left off their glaring contest and began looking under pillows, behind curtains, and in dresser drawers. Maria whimpered softly as the hunt dragged on without any results. He's probably running around the house having a great time, said Matt. He hates being outside, said Maria, weeping. Matt could believe it. The dog was such a loser that he ran from sparrows. But he probably was outside hiding in any of the 1,000 places. They'd never find him before dinner. Then something odd struck him. Tom. Tom was searching, but he didn't really seem to be looking. It was hard to describe Tom. Tom was going through the motions, but all the while his eyes were watching Maria. Matt stopped what he was doing and listened. I hear something, he cried. He dashed into the bathroom and lifted the toilet lid, and there was Furball, so waterlogged and exhausted he'd been able to utter only the faintest whine. Matt pulled the dog out and dropped him hastily on the floor. He grabbed a towel and wrapped up Furball. The dog was so tired he didn't even try to bite. He lay perfectly limp as Maria snatched him up. Oh, how did he get in there? Who put the top down? Oh, sweet, sweet darling Furball. She cuddled the revolting creature next to her face. You're okay now. You're my good dog. You're my honey bunch. He's always drinking out of the toilet, said Tom. He must have fallen in and pulled the lid down on top of him. I'll call a maid to get him a bath. He went out, but not before Matt saw a real flash of anger on his face. Tom had wanted something and hadn't gotten it. Matt was sure Tom had dumped Furball into the toilet, although he'd never shown dislike for the dog before. This was like Tom, though. He could be courteous and helpful on the surface, but you never knew what was going on underneath. Matt felt cold. Furball would have drowned if he hadn't found him. How could anybody be that cruel? And why would anyone want to hurt Maria, who was so tender-hearted she'd rescued Black Widow spiders? Matt knew no one would believe him if he accused Tom. He was only a clone and his opinions didn't matter. Or, it didn't matter most of the time, Matt thought as a delightful plan occurred to him. Most of the time the servants ignored Matt, and the Alacrans looked past him as though he were a bug on a window. Mr. Ortega, the music teacher, rarely said anything to him except no, 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 when Matt struck a wrong note. Mr. Ortega did say no, no, no very often now. Matt was an excellent piano player, and thought it wouldn't have hurt the man to say good now and then, but he never did. When Matt played well, an expression of joy crossed Mr. Ortega's face that was as good as any compliment, though. And when Matt played really, really well, he was too enraptured to care what the music teacher thought. Everything changed during the annual birthday party. It was really El Patron's party, but it had developed into a celebration for Matt as well. At least, Celia, Tomlin, Maria, and El Patron celebrated for him. Everyone else just gritted their teeth and got through the day. It was the one time where Matt could ask for anything he wanted. He could force the Alacrans to pay attention to him. He could make Stephen and Tom, Yes, Tom. Be polite to him in front of their friends. No one dared to make El Patron angry, and therefore no one dared to ignore Matt. Tables were set for the party in one of the vast gardens surrounding the big house. The lawn was flawlessly smooth, with the grass all the same height. It was cared for by Egypts, who trimmed the ground with scissors just before the event. It would be trampled into oblivion by tomorrow, but now it glowed like a green jewel in the soft afternoon light. The tables were covered with spotless white cloths. The dishes were trimmed with gold, and silver cutlery was freshly polished, and a crystal goblet set by each plate. In a corner, under a bougainvillea tree arbor, sat an enormous stack of presents. Everyone brought gifts to El Patron, although there was nothing that he didn't already own, and not much he could enjoy at the age of 143. There were even a few presents for Matt, small loving tributes from Celia and Maria, something useful from Tomlin, and a large expensive gift from El Patron. The guests wandered around, choosing delicacies brought to them on trays by the maids. Waiters offered drinks of every description and brought water pipes for those who wished to smoke. There were senators and famous actors, generals and war-renowned doctors, a few ex-presidents, and half a dozen dictators from places Matt had heard about on TV. There was even a faded-looking princess. And of course there were other farmers. The farmers were the real aristocrats here. They ruled the drug empire that formed the border between the U.S. and Aztlan. The farmers stood in a knot around a man Matt hadn't seen before. He had bristly red hair, a soft doughy face, and deep circles under his eyes. He looked unwell, but in spite of that, he was in a good mood. He harangued the others in a braying voice and punctuated his statements by poking them in the chest with a finger. By that alone, Matt knew he must be a farmer. No one else would dare to be so rude. "That's Mr. McGregor," said Maria. She had come up behind Matt with a fluff-dried fur ball draped over her arm. "Who?" For an instant, Matt was back in the little house in the poppy fields. He was 6 years old, and he was reading a tattered book about Pedro el Conejo, who got trapped in Senor McGregor's garden. Senor McGregor had wanted to put Pedro in a pie. "He has a farm near San Diego," said Maria. "Personally, I think he's creepy." Matt studied the man more closely. He didn't look like Senor McGregor in the book, but there was definitely something unpleasant about him. "They're signaling everyone to go inside the salon," said Maria. She hitched Furball into a more comfortable position. "You better not howl," she told the dog, no matter how awful the company is." "Thanks a lot," said Matt. The salon stood at the top of the marble steps leading up from the garden. The party guests drifted towards it, dutifully obeying the summons to greet El Patron. Matt braced himself for a shock. Each time he saw El Patron, the old man had deteriorated more. The guests arranged themselves in a semicircle. All around the edge of the salon were giant vases of flowers, and the marble statues so dear to El Patron's heart. The conversations died down. The sound of birds and fountains became clearer. A peacock shrieked from a nearby garden. Matt waited intensely for the hum of El Patron's motorized wheelchair. Then, amazingly, the curtain at the far end of the salon parted, and El Patron walked in. He moved slowly, to be sure, but he was actually walking. Matt was delighted. Behind the old man came Daft Donald and Tomlin, both pushing wheelchairs. A gasp echoed around the salon. Someone, the princess, Matt thought, cried, "Hip hip hooray!" And then everyone cheered. And Matt cheered too, filled with relief and joy. Someone behind Matt muttered, "The old vampire," so he managed to crawl out of the coffin again. Matt turned quickly to see who it was, but he couldn't tell which of the partygoers were guilty. When El Patron reached the middle of the salon, he signaled for Tomlin to bring him his wheelchair. He sank down, and Tomlin stuffed pillows around him. Much to Matt's surprise, Mr. McGregor came forward and sat in the other wheelchair. So they are friends, Matt thought. Why hadn't he seen Mr. McGregor before? "Welcome," said El Patron. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded instant attention. "Welcome to my 143rd birthday party. All of you are my friends and allies. Or family members." The old man laughed softly. "I imagine they hope to see me in my grave by now, but no such luck. I've had the benefit of a marvelous new treatment from the finest doctors in the world, and now my good friend McGregor is going to be treated by these same people." Mr. McGregor grinned and held up El Patron's arm as a referee would hold up a victorious boxer's arm. What was there about the man that was so repulsive? Matt felt his stomach knot, and yet he had no reason to dislike him. "Come forth, you miracle workers," said El Patron. 2 men and 2 women separated themselves from the crowd. They approached the wheelchairs and bowed. "I'm sure you'd be satisfied only with my heartfelt thanks," El Patron chuckled as the doctors tried to hide their disappointment. "But you'll be even more satisfied with these $1 million checks." The doctors immediately cheered up, although one of the women had the grace to blush. Everyone applauded, and the doctors thanked El Patron. Tomlin caught Matt's eye and nodded to him. Matt stepped forward. "Mi vida," said El Patron with real warmth. He beckoned with a gnarled hand. "Come closer and let me look at you. Was I ever that handsome? I must have been." The old man sighed and fell silent. Tomlin indicated that Matt was to stand next to the wheelchair. "I was a poor boy from a poor village," El Patron began, addressing the assembled presidents, dictators, generals, and other famous people. "One year during Cinco de Mayo, the ranchero who owned our land had a parade. I and my 5 brothers went to watch. Mama brought my little sisters. She carried one and the other held onto her skirt and followed behind. Matt saw the dusty cornfields and purple mountains of the Durango. He saw the streams that roared with water 2 months of the year and was dry as a bone the rest of the time. He had heard the story from El Patron so often he knew it by heart. During the parade, the mayor rode on a fine white horse and threw money into the crowd. How we scrambled for the coins. How we rolled in the dirt like pigs. But we needed the money. We were so poor we didn't have 2 pesos to rub together. Afterwards, the ranchero gave a great feast. We could eat all we wanted, and it was a wonderful opportunity for the people, who had stomachs so shrunken that chili beans had to wait in line to get inside. My little sisters caught typhoid at the feast. They died in the same hour. They were so small they couldn't look over the windowsill. No, not even they stood on tippy-toe. The salon was deathly still. In the distance, Matt heard a dove calling from the garden. No hope, it said. No hope, no hope. During the following years, each of my 5 brothers died. 2 drowned. 1 had a breast appendix, and we had no money for the doctor. The last 2 brothers were beaten to death by the police. And there were 8 of us, said El Patron, and only I lived to grow up. Matt thought the audience looked bored, although they tried to conceal it. They had heard the same speech for years. I outlived them all as I outlived all my enemies. Of course, I can always make more enemies. El Patron looked around the audience, and several people tried to smile. They met El Patron's steely gaze and immediately sobered up. You could say I'm a cat with 9 lives. As long as there's mice to catch, I intend to keep hunting. And thanks to the doctors, I can still enjoy it. You can start clapping now. He glared at the audience, and they began, first hesitantly and then loudly, to applaud. They're just like robots, El Patron murmured under his breath. More loudly he said, I'm going to take a brief rest, and then we shall all have dinner. Chapter 11. The Giving and Taking of Gifts. Excuse me. Matt wandered around the garden, admiring the ice sculptures and a fountain of wine with orange slices bobbing in a red pool. He dipped his fingers in to taste. It wasn't as good as it looked. He checked the place cards on the table and saw that he was, as usual, seated next to El Patron. Mr. McGregor was on El Patron's other side. The other favored guests were Mr. Alacran and Felicia, Benito, back from college, rather expelled from college, and Stephen and Tom. Mr. Alacran's father rounded out the guests at the head table. Everyone called him El Viejo these days because he seemed even older than El Patron. Humming to himself, Matt removed Tom's card and put it at the baby table, and then he sat at each end to keep order, and high chairs were lined up on either side. Matt located Maria's card and placed it next to his. Next, Matt explored the edge of the garden, where the bodyguards formed a sullen, dark perimeter. Each of the presidents, dictators, and generals had brought his own protectors, and of course, the Alacrans had hired a small army for the party. Now Matt counted more than 200 men. Who were they guarding against? He wondered. Who was likely to come charging across the poppy fields? But Matt was used to bodyguards at all family affairs, and it seemed natural for them to be there. The sun was setting, and the garden was full of a cool green light. The Ajo Mountains still glowed purple-brown in the distance, and the poppy fields were tipped with a gold that faded even as Matt watched. Lamps went on in the trees. "You pig!" cried Maria, who had Furball ensconced in a bag slung over her shoulder. "Just once you could be nice to Tom. I'm moving his card right back." "I'm punishing him for trying to drown Furball," said Matt. "What on earth are you talking about?" "Furball couldn't have fallen in the toilet and pulled the top down. It isn't possible. Tom did it." "He couldn't be that evil," said Maria. "Since when? Anyhow, it's my birthday party, and I get to say who sits where." Matt was beginning to lose patience with Maria. He was trying to be nice to her, and she was taking it all wrong. "They eat mush at the baby table." "Good," said Matt. He fetched Tom's card and replaced it. Maria reached for it again, and he grabbed her wrist quite hard. "Ow! That hurts! I'm going to stay here." "No, you aren't," said Matt. "I'll do whatever I like." Matt ran back to his table with Maria, trying to push past him, and grabbed her place card. El Patron had arrived, along with McGregor and the others. "What's this? What's this?" said El Patron. Matt and Maria skidded to a halt. "I want her to sit next to me," said Maria. The old man laughed, a dry, dusty sound. "Is she your little girlfriend? Your novia?" "That's disgusting," said Mr. Alacran. "Is it?" said El Patron, chuckled. "Matt's no different than I was at that age." "Matt's a clone." "He's my clone. Sit here, girl. Make room for her, Tomlin." Tomlin found a place setting for Maria. He frowned at Matt. "Where's Tom?" Felicia said. Everyone turned to look at her. Felicia was so quiet and so seldom seen, most people seemed to forget she existed. "Where is Tom?" El Patron turned to Matt. "I put him at the baby table," said Matt. "You pig!" shouted Maria. El Patron laughed. "That's the stuff, mi vida. Get rid of your enemies when you can. I don't like Tom either, and dinner will be better without him." Felicia balled up her napkin in her fist, but she didn't say anything. "I don't want to stay here. I want to be with Tom," cried Maria. "Well, you can't," Matt said flatly. Why did she always have to stick up for him? She didn't even stop to think. There was no way Furball could have pulled the lid down on top of himself. But she didn't believe Matt because he was only a disgusting clone. A dull rage at the unfairness of it swept over him. "Do as you're told, girl." El Patron suddenly lost interest in the drama and turned to Mr. McGregor on his other side. Maria choked back tears and was pushing up to the table. Maria, choking back tears, was pushed up to the table by Tomlin. "I'll see he gets the same food as the rest of us," he whispers. "No, you won't," said Matt. Tomlin raised his eyebrows. "Is that a direct order, Master Matt?" "Yes." Matt tried to ignore Maria's soft whimpers as she strove not to draw attention to herself. If she couldn't bring herself to punish Tom, he would do it for her. Food was brought and served. Maria selected bits to feed Furball and continued to stare down at her lap. "Fetal brain implants. I must try that sometime," said McGregor. "It does wonder for you." "Don't put it off too long," El Patron advised. "You have to give the doctors at least 5 months lead time. 8 is better." "I won't be able to use—" "Oh no, he's much too old." Felicia was staring down at her plate with almost as much dejection as Maria. She wasn't even pretending to eat. She drank from a tall glass that was regularly filled by a servant. She looked pleadingly at McGregor, although Matt couldn't guess what she would want from him. In any case, he ignored her. And so did her husband, and everyone else for that matter. El Viejo, Mr. Alacran's father, spilled his food and made a mess on the tablecloth. No one paid attention to him either. "See, there's an example of someone who didn't get his implants when he should have," said El Patron, pointing at El Viejo. "Father decided against it," said Mr. Alacran. "He's a fool, then. Look at him, Matt. Would you believe that's my grandson?" Matt hadn't worked out the exact relationship between El Viejo and El Patron before. It hadn't seemed important. El Patron looked ancient, no doubt about it, but his mind was sharp. At least now it was. after those whatever they were implants. El Viejo could hardly string a sentence together, and some of the time he sat in his room and screamed. Celia said that happened to some old people and that Matt mustn't worry about it. I can believe he's your grandfather, said Matt. El Patron laughed, spraying his food particles over his plate. That's what comes of not taking care of yourself. Father decided the implants were immoral, said Mr. Alacran, and I honor his decision. A sudden intake of breath around the table told Matt that Mr. Alacran had said something dangerous. He's deeply religious. He thinks God put him on earth for a certain number of years and that he mustn't ask for more. El Patron stared at Mr. Alacran for a long moment. I'll overlook your rudeness, he said at last. It is my birthday and I'm in a good mood. But someday you'll be old too. Your body will start to fall apart and your brain will deteriorate. See if you're so high-minded then. He went back to eating and everyone relaxed. May I check up on Tom? Felicia said in her uncertain way. Stay out of this, growled Mr. Alacran. I only want to see if he has food. For God's sake, he's capable of standing on his own hind legs and finding something to eat. Those were Matt's sentiments too, but he was surprised at the anger Mr. Alacran showed towards Felicia. How could anyone get mad at her? She was so helpless. Felicia hung her head and withdrew into silence. After dinner, Tomlin rolled El Patron to the Bougainvillea arbor for the gift-giving. Mr. McGregor excused himself because he had to rest up for an operation. Matt was glad to see him go. El Patron set great importance on gifts. You could tell how much someone loves you by the size of the present, he often told Matt. He preferred to receive gifts rather than give them. The flow of wealth should be from outside. El Patron opened his arms wide, as though he was about to give someone a hug. In. El Patron gave himself a big bear hug instead. Matt thought this was very funny. Daft Donald and Tomlin brought the boxes to El Patron. Matt read the cards and tore off the wrappers. A secretary recorded who had given what and the value of the gift. Watches, jewelry, paintings, statue, and moon rocks piled up on the lawn. Matt thought the moon rocks looked like something you could find anywhere in the Ajo Mountains, but they came with a certificate and were very expensive. The faded princes gave El Patron a statue of a naked baby with wings, one of the few gifts he seemed to like. Matt gave him a wallet that had looked good in a catalog and now seemed shabby next to the other presents. You'd need a wallet as big as the Grand Canyon to hold El Patron's paper money, Celia had said. And you'd have to drain the Gulf of California for the small change. The farmers, one and all, gave weapons. Guns that responded to one's voice, lasers that could burn an intruder to a crisp on the other side of a wall, flying mini-bombs that clamped themselves onto an enemy's skin. The latter was programmed to recognize specific people. Tomlin took the weapons away the minute Matt unwrapped them. Open your presents, mi vida, El Patron said after a long while. His eyes were half closed and he looked almost bloated with all the gifts he received. A mountain of possessions surrounded his wheelchair. Matt eagerly tore open a small box from Celia. It was a hand-knitted sweater. Where she'd find the time to knit, Matt didn't know. Tomlin gave him a book identifying edible plants in the desert. El Patron gave him a battery-driven car big enough to sit in. It had flashing lights and a siren. Matt was too old for such things, but he knew the car had been very expensive, and therefore El Patron loved him very much. Maria snatched away the present she'd brought him. I don't want to give you anything, she cried. Give that back, Matt said, angry that she'd made a scene in front of everyone. You don't deserve it! Maria started to run away, but was halted by her father, Senator Mendoza. Hand in the box, said Senator Mendoza. He was mean to Tom. Do it. Maria wavered for a moment, then flung the box as far away as she could. Pick it up and bring it to me, Matt said. He was in a cold rage. Let her go, said Tomlin in a low voice, but Matt wasn't in any mood to listen. Maria had insulted him in front of everyone, and he intended to make her pay. That's the stuff, El Patron said gleefully. Make your woman toe the line. Get it now, said Matt in the same cold, deadly voice he had heard El Patron use on a terrified servant. Please, Maria, said Senator Mendoza. Senator Mendoza coaxed gently. Sobbing, she retrieved the present and thrust it at Matt. I hope you choke on it. Matt was trembling, afraid he'd lose control and start crying too. Suddenly, he remembered what El Patron had said earlier. Is she your little girlfriend? Why shouldn't Maria be his girlfriend? Why should he be different from everyone just because he was a clone? When he looked into the mirror, he saw no difference between himself and the others. It was unfair that he was treated like Furball when he had good grades and could name planets, the brightest stars in all the constellations. One more thing, Matt said. I demand a birthday kiss. Gasps ricocheted around the crowd. Senator Mendoza turned ashen, and he put his hands protectively on Maria's shoulder. Don't do this, murmured Tomlin. El Patron beamed with delight. It's my party too, said Matt, and I can have anything I want. Isn't that so, mi patron? It's so, my little fighting cock. Give him the kiss, girl. He's a clone, Senator Mendoza cried. He's my clone. Suddenly, El Patron wasn't the jovial birthday host anymore. He seemed dark and dangerous, like a creature you might stumble on in the middle of the night. Matt remembered Tomlin's words about his master. He grew large and green until he shadowed over the whole forest, but most of his branches are twisted. Matt was sorry he started this whole affair, but it was too late now. Do it, Maria, said Senator Mendoza. I won't let it happen again, I promise. The senator didn't know that Maria had kissed Matt on several occasions, just as she kissed Furball and anything else that pleased her. Matt knew this was different, though. He was humiliating her. If it had been Tom asking for the kiss, no one would have cared. People would have thought it was cute for a boy to flirt with his novia. Matt wasn't a boy. He was a beast. Maria came up to him, no longer angry or rebellious. She reminded him of Felicia, bent sadly over her plate. For an instant he wanted to say, "Stop. It was a joke. I didn't mean it." But it was too late. El Patron was watching them, with obvious glee, and Matt realized it might be dangerous to draw back now. Who knew how the old man might punish Maria if he had his fun spoiled now? Maria leaned forward, and Matt felt the cold brush of her lips on his skin. Then she ran to her father and collapsed in tears. He gathered her up and shouldered his way through the crowd. The paralysis that had seized everyone broke. Everyone started talking at once, not about what had just happened, but about anything else. But Matt felt their eyes on him, accusing, disgusted, repelled. El Patron had worried from the excitement. He signaled Tomlin and Daft Donald to take him away and was already being carried up the steps before Matt noticed. The party went on with renewed spirit now that El Patron was gone, but no one talked to Matt. No one even seemed to notice that he was there. After a while, he gathered up his small presents, leaving the battery-driven car for the servants to attend to. Matt made his way to Celia's apartment and laid out Celia's sweater and Tomlin's book. Then he opened Maria's gift. It was a box of taffy she made with her own hands. He knew because she told him about it ahead of time. She was no good at keeping secrets. Matt knew Maria hoarded things. Worn-out shirts, broken toys, and gift-wrapping paper. And she got hysterical if anything went missing. Celia said it was because she lost her mother when she was only 5. One day, Maria's mother had walked out of the house and never returned. No one knew where she'd gone, or if they did, they weren't talking about it. When Maria was small, she imagined her mother had gotten lost in the desert. She woke up every night crying that she could hear her mother's voice, but of course she couldn't. Ever since then, Celia said, Maria had clung on to things. It was why she rarely let Furball out of her sight and why the dog was such a wimp. Maria had cut squares from her treasured gift-wrapping paper and used them to wrap Matt's taffy. He felt terrible looking at them. Why hadn't he listened to when Tomlin told her to let it go? He closed the box and put it away. Celia had drawn the curtains to his room. As always, she had lit the candle in front of the Virgin. The Virgin looked shabby with her chipped robe and cheap plastic flowers. Matt wouldn't have wanted her to look any other way. He crawled under the covers. Feeling around, he found the lump that was his stuffed bear. He would have died rather than to admit to Maria that he still slept with it. Chapter 12. The Thing on the Bed. Matt woke feeling gritty and hot. The candle in front of the Virgin had burnt out, leaving a waxy smell that the curtains held in. He opened the window, wincing at the sudden invasion of sunlight. It was late morning. Celia had already gone to work. Rubbing his eyes, Matt saw Maria's present on a shelf, and the birthday party came back with a hideous clearness. He knew he had to make things up to her, but he also knew she needed time to cool down. If he approached her now, she'd only slam the door in his face. Matt dressed in cool clothes and found leftover pizza for breakfast. The apartment was empty and the walled garden deserted except for the birds. He went out and watered the vegetables. The day after the party was always a letdown. The power Matt enjoyed as El Patron's clone vanished. The servants went back to ignoring him. The Alacrans treated him like something furball had coughed up on the carpet. The hours dragged on. Matt practiced on his guitar, a skill he was developing without Mr. Ortega's help. The music master was unable to keep his hands on the instrument and thus was unable to detect mistakes. After a while, Matt switched to reading Tomlin's Present. The bodyguard was fond of nature books, though he read them at a painfully slow rate. Matt had already books on wildlife, camping, map reading, and survival that Tomlin fully expected him to study. Tomlin drilled him when they were on expeditions in the off-hole mountains. All Matt's activities were supposed to be risk-free. Thus, he was only allowed to ride safe horses and could only swim if there were 2 lifeguards present. He could climb ropes only if there was a mountain of mattresses underneath. Any bruise or cut was treated with extreme alarm. But once a week, Tomlin took Matt on educational field trips. The trips were disguised as visits to the Alacran nuclear. Excuse me, my mouth is just getting a little dry. Hi, Cal. Thank you for stopping by. I'm glad you're here. But once a week, Tomlin took Matt on educational field trips. The trips were disguised as visits to the Alacran nuclear power plant or the opium processing plant. A stinking, clanking horror even in Egypt would find unbearable. Halfway there, Tomlin would turn in the horses towards the hills. Matt lived through these expeditions. El Patron would have had a heart attack if he'd known how many cliffs Matt climbed and how many rattlesnakes he teased out of rocks. But they made Matt feel strong and free. "May I come in?" said a faint, uncertain voice. Matt jumped. He had been daydreaming. He heard the person enter the living room. "It's Felicia." Ew, bots! Ew, bots! Can we please get rid of those bots? Remove. Disgusting. Why are there bots coming in here? Remove. And remove. Goodbye. See you later, bots. It didn't work, but it's a monkey. He looks very lost. Aww. Let's see. Where was I going? Here we go. "May I come in?" said a faint, uncertain voice. Matt jumped. He had been daydreaming. He heard the person enter the living room. "It's Felicia," said Felicia hesitantly, as though she weren't quite sure of her identity. This is completely weird, thought Matt. Felicia had never shown the slightest interest in him. "What do you want?" he asked. "I thought I might visit." Felicia's eyes looked heavy, like she might fall asleep at any moment. A vague odor of cinnamon hung around her. "Why?" Matt knew he was being rude, but when had the Alacrans been anything else when had the Alacrans been anything else to him? Besides, there was something creepy about the way Felicia swayed back and forth. "May I sit?" Matt pulled a chair over to her, since it didn't look like she'd make it by herself. He tried to help her, but she pushed him away. Of course, he was a clone. He wasn't supposed to touch humans. Felicia half fell into the chair, and they stared at each other for a moment. "You're a good musician," Felicia stammered, as though it hurt her to admit it. "How do you know?" Matt couldn't remember ever playing when she was around. "Everyone says so. It's such a surprise. El Patron doesn't have a musical bone in his body." "He enjoys listening," Matt said. He didn't like to hear El Patron criticized. "I know. He used to listen to me." Matt felt uneasy. He'd probably taken away what little attention Felicia had got from the other people. "I was a great concert pianist once," she said. "I've heard you play." "You have?" Felicia's eyes widened. "Oh, the music room. I was much better before I had my nervous breakdown," said Matt. Her hesitant speech was getting on his nerves. "But that isn't why I came. I want to... Matt waited impatiently. "Help you," finished Felicia. There was another long pause as Matt wondered what kind of help she thought he needed. "You upset Maria. She cried all night. Matt felt uncomfortable. What does Felicia have to do with this? She wants to see you. Okay, said Matt. But don't you see? Her father won't let her come here. It's up to you. What should I do? Go to her, cried Felicia, with more energy than Matt had expected. Go now. The outburst seemed to exhaust her. Her head drooped as she closed her eyes. You wouldn't have something to drink, she whispered. Celia doesn't keep alcohol, said Matt. Should I call one of the maids? He said. Never mind. Felicia sighed, rousing herself enough to stand. Maria's waiting at the hospital. It's important. With that, Felicia made her way to the door and drifted into the hallway like a cinnamon-scented ghost. The hospital wasn't a place Matt went willingly. Set apart from the rest of the buildings, it was surrounded by a wasteland of sand and low, flat bullhead vines. The vines protected their turf with the meanest, nastiest thorns ever, and could even stab through shoes. Matt picked his way carefully through the wastelands. Heat radiated off the ground, making the gray, windowless buildings shimmer. The hospital was like a prison with a strange, alarming smell inside that permeated everything. Matt was dragged there twice a year to undergo painful and humiliating tests. He sat on the front steps and expected his son before bullheads. Maria was probably in the waiting room. It wasn't too bad there, with chairs and magazines and a cold drink machine. Sweat ran down Matt's face and stuck to his shirt and chest. He opened the door. I don't see why I should talk to you at all, said Maria. She was sitting in one of the chairs with a magazine open on her lap. Her eyes looked puffy. It was your idea. Matt bit his tongue. He wanted to make up with her, not pick a fight. I mean, it was a good idea. You're the one who invited me, said Maria. Why could you find someone nicer? This place is creepy. Matt's alarm system went off at once. I didn't invite you. Wait, he cried as Maria started to get up. I do want to see you. I guess I was a pig at the birthday party. You guess? Said Maria scornfully. Okay, I was. But you didn't have to take back the present. Of course I did. A present's no good if it's given in anger. Matt stopped his first reply before he could get out. It's the nicest gift I ever got. Oh, sure. Nicer than that weenie sports car El Patron gave you. Matt sat down next to her. She moved away as far as she could. I really like how you wrapped the candy. It took me a long time to decide which papers to use. Maria's voice trembled. You only wadded them up and throw them away. No, I won't, promised Matt. I'll spread them out carefully and keep them for always. Maria said nothing. She stared down at her hands. Matt edged closer. The truth was, he liked it when she kissed him, even if she kissed Furball 60 times as often. He'd never kissed her back, but he might try it now to make up. Good, you're both here. Matt recoiled. Tom stood in the doorway. How did you find us? Matt snarled. Of course he knew we were here. You told him to bring me here, said Maria. No kidding, said Matt. The pieces were falling into place now. Tom had pretended to carry a message to Maria, and Felicia had done the same with Matt. They had to be working together. Matt had never thought of Felicia as dangerous, but he didn't really know her. I thought you might like to see something, said Tom. His face was open and friendly, and his blue eyes shone with innocence. Matt wanted to roll him in the bullheads. Here? Here? Said Maria doubtfully. It's like Halloween, only better. It's the ugliest, gooshiest thing you ever saw, and I bet both of you wet your pants, said Tom. I've done things that would make your eyes drop out, Maria sneered. Tomlin showed me how to pick up scorpions, and he let a tarantula walk up my arm. Matt was surprised at Maria's daring. Tomlin had shown him the same things, and Matt had almost done what Tom described. This is worse, said Tom. Remember the Halloween when you thought the chupacabras were outside, and Matt put chicken guts in your bed? I did not! It was you! You put your hand right in it, said Tom, ignoring Matt, and screamed your head off. That was so evil, Maria said. I didn't do it, protested Matt. Well, this is worse, gloated Tom. I don't know if you have the, pardon the expression, guts for it. She doesn't, said Matt. Don't tell me what to do. Maria got a malicious look in her eyes, and Matt's heart sank. He knew Tom was up to something foul, but he hadn't figured out what it was yet. Come on, he's only trying to start trouble. Matt tried to grab Maria's hand, but she yanked her arm away. Listen. Tom opened the door leading from the waiting room to the rest of the hospital. Matt's stomach hit rock bottom. He had bad memories of some of those rooms. Tom's face glowed with joy. It was then Matt had discovered he was most dangerous. As Tomlin said, if you didn't know Tom well, you'd think he was an angel bringing you the keys to the pearly gates. In the distance, they heard a mewing sound. It went on for a moment, stopped, and began again. Is that a cat? Said Maria. If it isn't yowling for milk, thought Matt. There was a level of terror and despair in that sound that made the hair stand up on his neck. This time he did grab Maria's hand. They're doing experiments on cats, she cried suddenly. Oh, please, you've got to help me rescue them. You better ask permission first, said Matt. He was deeply unwilling to go beyond that door. No one's going to give us permission, Maria stormed. Don't you see? Adults don't see anything wrong with those experiments. We have to take the cats away. Dada will help me. And the doctors won't even know where they've gone. They'll only get more. Matt felt cold as he listened to the sound going on and on. That's the dodge people always use. Don't help anyone. They only find more illegals to enslave or poor people to starve or cats to torture. Maria was working herself into a state. Matt despaired of getting her to listen to reason. Look, we should ask your dad first, he began. I won't listen to that cat stuff for one more instant. Are you going with me or not? If not, I'm going by myself. I'll go with you, said Tom. That decided Matt. There was no way he was going to let Tom take Maria by herself to see whatever hoard he had stashed away. Maria strode down the hall, but she slowed the closer they got to the cries. Matt still held her hand. It was cold and sweaty, or maybe his hand was. The sound wasn't exactly like a cat. It wasn't like anything Matt had heard before, but there was no mistaking the anguish in it. Sometimes it rose almost to a shriek and then faded, as though whatever was making that noise was exhausted. They arrived at the door. It was closed, and cravenly, Matt hoped it was locked. It wasn't. Tom threw it open. Matt could hardly register what lay on the bed before them. It rolled its eyes and thrashed helplessly in the straps that restrained it. Its mouth opened in a terrible O when it saw the children, and it screamed louder than Matt thought possible. It screamed until it ran out of air, and then wheezed until it didn't have the strength to do any more. Then it lay there panting and gasping. It's a boy, whispered Maria. It was, only at first Matt thought it was some kind of beast, so alien and terrible with its face. It had doughy, unhealthy skin and red hair that stuck up in bristles. It seemed to never have been in the sun, and its hands were twisted like claws above the straps that held it down. It was dressed in green hospital pajamas, but these had been befouled by its terror. Worst of all was the terrible energy that had rolled through the trapped body. The creature never stopped moving. It was as though invisible snakes were rippling beneath the skin and forcing its arms and legs to move for a ceaseless bid for freedom. It's not a boy, Tom said scornfully. It's a clone. Matt felt as though he'd been punched in the stomach. He had never seen another clone. He only felt the weight of hatred humans had for such things. He hadn't understood it because, after all, clones were like dogs and cats, and humans loved them. If he thought about it at all, he had assumed he was a pet, only a very intelligent one. Matt became aware that Maria no longer held his hand. She shrunk against Tom, and he had his arm around her. The creature, clone, had regained its energy and was screaming again. Something about the children terrified it, or perhaps it was terrified all the time. Its tongue protruded from its mouth and drooled saliva down its chin. Who's... Maria whispered. McGregor's. He's a real wreck. His liver's all eaten up with alcohol, Tom said in a casual, chatty way. Mom says he looks like something the Grim Reaper forgot to pick up. Mom, thought Matt. Felicia. Are they going to... Maria said. Tonight, said Tom. I can't bear to look at him, wailed Maria. I don't want to think about it. Tom pulled her away, and Matt knew he was enjoying every minute of this. Shall I leave you two alone together? Tom inquired from the doorway. Matt had trouble turning his eyes away from the thing on the bed. There was no way it could be the same sort of being as that creature. It wasn't possible. The creature opened his mouth to make another horrible scream, and Matt suddenly knew who it looked like. It resembled McGregor, of course, because it was his clone. But McGregor was an adult with differences that made it hard to see the connection. It was a lot closer to. Enough to show kinship with. It looks like you, Matt said to Tom. You wish! You wish! Yelled Tom, dropping his cheerful grin. Look, Maria, it has the same red hair and ears. But she refused to look up. Take me out of here, she moaned with her face buried in Tom's shirt. I'm not like that thing, shouted Matt. Use your eyes! He tried to pull her from Tom, and she shrieked, Don't touch me! I don't want to think about it! Matt was beside himself with frustration. You wanted to come down here to rescue a cat. Well, look at this! It needs rescuing! Oh, no, whimpered Maria. She was in a state of utter panic. Take me away, she wailed. Tom hurried her down the hall. He glanced back with a look of savage triumph, and Matt had to clench his teeth very hard to keep from running after them and pounding Tom within an inch of his life. It wouldn't do Maria any good. It wouldn't do Matt any good either, except to convince her he really was a beast. The footsteps died away, and Matt stood for a moment in the hallway, listening to the mewling of the thing on the bed. He then closed the door and followed them. Chapter 13, The Lotus Pond. I need a drink, excuse me. Matt had to talk to someone. He had to do something to keep from howling like a dog at the horror of it all. He wasn't a clone. He couldn't be. Somehow, somewhere, a mistake had been made. The words he overheard from the doctors came back to him. Clones go to pieces when they get older. What's going to happen to him? Was he going to end up strapped to a bed, screaming until he ran out of air? Tomlin was with El Patron, and not even Matt was allowed to go to that heavily guarded part of the house without permission. He ran to the kitchen instead. Celia took one look at his face and hung up her apron. Finish the soup for me, would you? She told the junior cook. She took Matt's hand and said, Let's take the afternoon off, Chico. The Alacrans can eat their shoes for dinner for all I care. Alone of all the servants, Celia could and did insult the Alacrans whenever she felt like it. Not to their faces, of course, but she was less servile in their presence than the others. She, like Matt, was protected by El Patron. Celia said nothing more until they were inside the apartment with the door closed. Okay, something bad happened, she said. Is Maria still mad? Matt didn't know where to begin. If you say you're sorry, she'll forgive you, Celia said. She's a good kid. I did apologize, Matt managed to say. And she wouldn't accept it. Well, that happens sometimes. Sometimes we have to grovel to show we really mean it. That isn't it. Celia pulled him onto her lap, something she rarely did now that he was older, and held him tightly. Matt's reserve snapped. He sobbed uncontrollably, clinging to her, terrified she would push him away. Hey. Maria wouldn't hold a grudge. You have to make her a list of who she's mad at, because she doesn't remember more than half an hour. Celia rocked Matt back and forth, all the while murmuring comforting words he could hardly take in. All he sensed was the music of her voice, the warmth of her arms, and the fact that she was there. Finally, he calmed enough to tell her everything that happened in the hospital. For a moment, Celia sat perfectly still. She didn't even breathe. That little creep, she said at last. Matt looked up anxiously. Her face had turned pale and her eyes stared into the far distance. Tom is McGregor's son, you know, said Celia. I shouldn't tell you these things at your age, but nobody gets a decent childhood in the Alacran household. They're all scorpions. Boy, did El Patron have it right when he picked the name. How can Tom be McGregor's son? Felicia's married to Mr. Alacran. Celia bitterly laughed. Marriage doesn't mean much to this crowd. Felicia ran off with McGregor, years ago. I guess she got bored hanging around here. Only it didn't work out. El Patron had her brought back. He didn't like people taking his possessions, and McGregor let him do it. Felicia was beginning to bore him. Mr. Alacran was very, very angry because he didn't want her back, but El Patron didn't care. Mr. Alacran doesn't talk to her anymore. He won't even look at her. She's a prisoner in this house, and the servants supply her with all the booze she can handle. Which is a lot, let me tell you. What about Tom? Matt urged. Tom showed up about 6 months after she returned. Matt felt slightly better after learning this information. It pleased him that Felicia was in disgrace, but he still had questions. He steeled himself to ask the most important one. What's wrong with McGregor's clone? Celia looked nervously around. I'm not supposed to talk to you about this. You weren't supposed to know about him. But I do know, said Matt. Yes, and that's Tom's doing. You don't understand me, Vida. All of us have been warned not to talk about clones. We don't always know who might be listening. Again, Celia looked around, and Matt remembered what Tomlin had told him about hidden cameras in the house. If you tell me, it'll be Tom's fault, said Matt. That's true. I really don't see how I can avoid explaining it after what you've seen. So, what's wrong with McGregor's clone? His brain has been destroyed. Matt sat up straight when he heard that. When clones are born, they're injected with a kind of drug. It turns them into idiots, said Celia. She wiped her eyes with her apron. Why? It's the law. Don't ask me why, I can't tell you. But I wasn't injected, said Matt. El Patron didn't want it to happen to you. He's powerful enough to break the law. Matt was filled with gratitude for the old man who had spared him such a terrible fate. Matt could read and write, climb hills, play music, and do anything a real human might do, all because El Patron loved him. Are there any others like me, he asked. No, you're the only one, said Celia. The only one? He was unique. He was special. Matt's heart welled with pride. If he wasn't human, he might become something even better. Better than Tom, who was an embarrassment to the family. Then, a horrible thought occurred to him. Doctors won't inject me later, right? Celia hugged him again. No, darling, you're safe from that. You're safe for as long as you live. She was crying, although Matt couldn't understand why. Perhaps she was afraid because she had said something in front of the hidden cameras. Matt felt limp with relief. He was exhausted by all that happened, and he yawned broadly. Take a nap, mi vida, said Celia. I'll bring you something nice from the kitchen later. She led him to his bedroom and turned on the air conditioner and closed the curtains. Matt stretched out under the sheet and let a delicious sense of ease sweep over him. So much had happened. The disastrous party, the sinister hospital, McGregor's clone. Matt felt hurt that Maria had run from him after seeing the thing on the bed. He would seek her out later and show her that he was completely different. As Matt drifted to sleep, he pondered why McGregor would want a clone when he had a son. It was probably because Tom had been taken away from him by El Patron, and because Tom was an unnatural little weevil no father would like to have around. But then, Matt thought hazily, why replace him with a horribly damaged clone? Maria refused to talk to Matt. She hid in her father's apartment or managed to be with a group of people every time he saw her. But Matt had faith in Maria's intelligence. If he could get her alone and explain how he was different from all other clones, she would understand. McGregor was back from his operation. He still looked, as Felicia put it. Excuse me. Oh my. Ow, excuse me. Oof, that was a hard sneeze. It hurt my stomach. Ah. Excuse me. McGregor was back from his operation. He still looked, as Felicia put it, like something the Grim Reaper forgot to collect. But he was getting better all the time. He and El Patron sat in adjoining wheelchairs and cackled over old memories, rivals they had destroyed and governments they had overthrown. Got me a new liver, McGregor said, patting his stomach, and went in for a set of kidneys while I was at it. He gazed at Matt with those bright blue eyes that were so much like Tom's. Matt thought he was disgusting. He couldn't wait for the man to go home. Maria would be leaving for boarding school soon. Matt realized he had to act now. As he watched her across the garden playing tag at a slow pace because she had Furball on her side, the solution came to him. Maria didn't have the dog with her all the time. Now and then, Senator Mendoza banished him to the bathroom in their apartment. What if Matt stole the animal and sent her a ransom note? There was a pump house by the lotus palm. It was concealed by a giant wisteria vine and reasonably cool inside. Matt could hide Furball there. But how could he keep the dog from yapping? Even a spider swinging down on its web sent the animal into hysterics. He won't bark if he's asleep, Matt thought. Matt spent a lot of time in a secret passage behind the music room. He liked to pretend he was a superhero creeping up on his enemies. He'd replaced El Tigro Negro as his hero with Don Segundo Sombra, Sir Second Shadow, an international spy. The Black Whip was for kids, but the Don did adult things like drive race cars and parachute out of jet planes. An even better hero was El Sacerdote Volante, the Flying Priest. The Flying Priest bombarded demons with holy water that ate holes into their scaly hides. One of the closets, reachable from the secret passage, belonged to Felicia. It was full, top to bottom, with liquor. More interesting and useful now was a shelf of small bottles with eyedroppers. They contained laudanum. Matt knew all about laudanum, having studied the opium business as a part of his regular homework. Laudanum was opium dissolved in alcohol, and it was very strong. 3 drops in a glass of fruit juice would knock you out for 8 hours. Felicia had enough stored in her closet to knock out an entire city. It explained why she was so dopey all the time. Matt waited until he saw her dozing on a lawn chair, then hurried through the secret passage and stole one of the small bottles. The lotus pond was one of the dozen pools of water in the vast gardens of the house. It was deserted in summer because it had little shade. Ibises, with wings clipped to keep them from flying away, stalked through papyrus grass and hunted frogs under the lily pads. It was El Patron's idea of an ancient Egyptian garden. The walls enclosed the place were painted with stiff figures of ancient gods. Matt pushed aside the wisteria and went into the pump house. It was dark and damp. He made a bed for Furball out of empty sacks and filled a bowl with water. He stepped outside and froze. Tom was on his hands and knees on the other side of the garden. His back was turned and he was absorbed in watching something on the lawn. Matt eased carefully out of the wisteria. He moved quietly to the papyrus and sneaked back into the house. An ibis rose from the grass. It flapped its mutilated wings and blundered across the pond. Tom jumped up. "You! What are you doing here?" "Watching you," said Matt coolly. "Well, it's none of your business. Go back to your part of the house." "All parts of the house are mine," said Matt. He looked past Tom and saw a frog on the lawn. Its hind legs had been nailed to the ground, and it flopped frantically, trying to escape. "You're disgusting," said Matt. He went over and freed the frog's feet. The creature threw itself into the water. "I was only doing a science project," said Tom. "Oh, sure, even Maria wouldn't believe that." Tom's face flushed with rage, and Matt braced himself for a fight. But just as suddenly the anger drained away, as though it had never been there. Matt shivered. It bothered him when Tom made a lightning shift like that. It was like watching a crocodile submerged in the nature movie. You knew the crocodile was planning an attack, but you didn't know when. "You could learn a lot from studying a place like this," Tom said in a casual voice. "The ibises live on frogs, the frogs eat bugs, and the bugs eat one another. It teaches you about the meaning of life." Tom had on his professional cute kid smile. It didn't fool Matt for 1 second. "Let me guess. You're on the side of the ibises," said Matt. "Of course. Who wants to be on the bottom of the food chain?" said Tom. "That's the difference between humans and animals, see? The humans are at the top, and the animals, well, they're just walking T-bone steaks and drumsticks." He strolled off, an easy, good-natured stroll to show he wasn't concerned that Matt had disturbed his evil game. Matt watched him disappear into the house. What rotten luck, Matt thought. He didn't want Tom poking around while he was talking to Maria. If only he could slip Tom some laudanum. For a moment, Matt savored the idea, but he knew that would be taking it too far. Maria had the dog glued to her all morning and all through lunch the next day. Finally, Senator Mendoza said, "For God's sakes, Maria, it stinks." "Did you roll in something icky?" she said fondly, holding up the creature to her nose. "Did you, sweetums?" "Get it out of here," her father snapped. Matt was observing this from behind a wall hanging. He slithered along the curtains and followed Maria. If he could talk to her now, he wouldn't have to kidnap the stupid dog. She thrust Furball into her apartment and closed the door. Agonized yips broke out from the other side. Maria, Matt began. Oh, hi! Listen, I've got to run. Dad will get mad if I don't come back right away. I just want to talk. Not now, cried Maria, dodging past him. She ran down the hall, her sandals slapping against the floor. Matt felt like crying. Why was she making things so difficult? Would it kill her to listen? He hurried off to Celia's apartment to get a bowl of raw hamburger he noticed in the refrigerator. When he returned, he looked around carefully for servants coming down the hall. The minute he opened Maria's door, Furball yelped and scurried under the sofa. Great. Matt picked up the side bag Maria used to cart the animal around. He opened it temptingly and placed a chunk of hamburger inside. The dog whined and drooled as he watched. Maria fed him a special diet recommended by a vet, but it didn't include raw meat. She didn't like the idea of raw meat. You want that. You know you do, said Matt. Furball licked his chops. Matt held up a glob of the stuff and blew the smell towards the animal. Furball trembled all over and swallowed several times. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore and darted out. In an instant, Matt had trapped him inside the bag. Furball snarled and tried to claw his way out. Matt poked a crumb of hamburger into the bag and he got a bite that drew blood. Furball howled piteously. Here, eat yourself silly, Matt cried, shoving fistfuls of meat inside. Matt heard slurping, gulping, and frantic licking. Then, miraculously, the animal stretched out in the bag and fell asleep. Matt peeked inside to be sure. This is even better than he hoped. He slung the bag over his shoulder, expecting outraged yips when the dog felt himself being moved. There was nothing. Furball was used to being hauled around. He slept in the bag all the time and probably felt safe wrapped up in his little dark cave. Matt could understand that. He was fonder of dark hideaways himself. He left a note under Maria's pillow. Meet me by the Lotus Pond at midnight. And you... Yeah. Meet me at the Lotus Pond at midnight. And you tell... Meet me by the Lotus Pond at midnight, and I'll tell you where your dog is. He signed it, Matt. Then, P.S. Don't tell anyone or you'll never see him again. Matt supposed this last line was mean, but he was fighting against an impossible odd. He slipped out of the apartment, leaving the door ajar so it seemed the dog had worked it open. The halls were empty and the lotus garden deserted, except for the ibises meditating on the existence of Frens. Everything was working out perfectly. Furball stirred slightly when Matt laid the bag down in the pump house, but he didn't bark. Matt decided to leave the tin in the bag. He could come out when he felt like it and find water, and the rest of the hamburger. Matt put the lot of them on the shelf. He was frankly relieved he didn't have to use it. As much as he disliked Furball, it seemed wrong to feed him some same stuff that turned Felicia into a zombie. Maria discovered Furball missing right after lunch. She enlisted everyone except Matt to hunt for him. Matt could hear the voices calling, but anyone familiar with the beast knew he wouldn't answer. He would cower in whatever hiding spot he found until dragged out, snapping and snarling. Celia was asleep when Matt left. Most of the hall lights had been turned off, and the black areas yawned between them. Not long ago, Matt would have been afraid to go out so late. He no longer believed in the chupacabras or vampires, but the dark, dead stillness of the night brought him back. What if Maria was too frightened to leave her apartment? Matt hadn't thought of that. If she didn't come, the whole plan would be ruined. His footsteps echoed on the floor. He stopped many times to be sure no one was following him. He checked his watch. It was 15 minutes to midnight when the dead, according to Celia, threw off their coffin lids like so many blankets. Stop that, Matt told himself. The lotus garden was lit only by starlight, and the air was warm and smelled of stagnant water. Not a frond of the palm trees stirred. Not a mosquito whined. Somewhere in the papyrus, the ibises were sleeping, or perhaps they were awake and listening to him. What would they do when they realized he was here? Don't be a wuss, Matt told himself. They're only birds. They're long-legged chickens. A frog grunted, making Matt almost drop the flashlight he carried. He shone around the pond. He heard a splash and a ruffle of feathers. Matt walked silently as he could towards the pump house. It would be truly awful to hear Furball whine right now. Maybe Maria wouldn't come. After all, If he was this jumpy, she might be terrified. But she'd come for her dog. Matt didn't underestimate her courage when she thought something was important. He reached the wisteria. It would be better to wait here or to check in on Furball. He didn't much like going to the dark little house. Anyhow, if he went inside, Maria wouldn't know where to find him. He heard a noise. Footlights lit up every corner of the garden. It was El Patron's security system. Matt was blinded. He backed into the wisteria and was grabbed by powerful hands. "Let me go!" Matt shouted. "I'm not an enemy. I'm El Patron's clone." Daft Donald and Tomlin Frog marched into the middle of the lawn. It's me!" Matt cried, but Tomlin remained silent and grim. Senator Mendoza came out of the big house. He stood in front of Matt, flexing his hands as though he had to keep them under control. For a long, long moment he said nothing. Then, "You are worse than an animal." He spoke with such concentrated venom that Matt flinched back against the hands restraining him. "Oh, I won't hurt you. I'm not that kind of man. Besides, your fate lies with El Patron." Another long pause. Just when Matt began to think the man wasn't going to say anything else, Senator Mendoza said, "You can count on one thing. You will never, ever see my daughter again." "But why?" Matt said, startled out of his fear. "You know why." Matt didn't. This was all a horrible nightmare he couldn't wake up. "I only wanted to talk to her. I meant to give Furball back. I didn't mean to upset her and I'm sorry now. Please let me see her to say I'm sorry." "How can you possibly apologize for killing her dog?" For an instant, Matt wasn't sure he heard right. Then the full enormity of the situation sank in. "But I didn't! I wouldn't! I could never do such a thing to Maria. I love her!" The minute Matt said it, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. Senator Mendoza looked as though he wanted to strangle Matt right there and throw his body into the lotus pond. Nothing could have been more infuriating than a reminder of how close Maria and Matt had become. So close that Matt had to demand a kiss from her in front of everyone at El Patron's birthday party. It was unthinkable. It was as though a chimpanzee had demanded to wear human clothes and to eat at the same table as people. Worse, because Matt wasn't even a normal forest-living beast. He was the thing on the bed. I'm sorry. Matt's mind had frozen. All he could think of was to keep apologizing until Senator Mendoza heard and forgave him. "You're lucky you're under El Patron's protection." Senator Mendoza turned and strode into the house. "Move along," said Tomlin as he and Daft Donald propelled Matt from the garden. "I didn't do it!" cried Matt. "They found your fingerprints on the laudanum bottle," said Tomlin. Matt had never heard him like this before. So cold, so bitter, so disgusted. "I did take the laudanum, but I didn't use it." They were moving rapidly through the halls with Matt's feet only brushing the floor. They arrived at Celia's apartment. Tomlin paused before opening the door. "I always say," Tomlin said, breathing hard as if he had run a long way, "I always say the truth is best even if we find it unpleasant. Any rat in the sewer can lie. It's how rats are. It's what makes them rats. But a human doesn't run and hide in dark places because he's something more. Lying is the most personal act of cowardice there is." "I'm not lying!" Matt couldn't help crying, even though he knew it was a babyish thing to do. "I can believe you made a mistake," Tomlin went on. "The bottle said 3 drops. That's the dose for a full-grown man. But Furball was a dog. A dose like that would kill him. Did kill him." "Someone else gave it to him," Matt cried. "I'd feel sorry for you if I hadn't seen Maria first. And I'd feel more kindly if you stepped up and took the blame you deserve." "I'm not lying!" "Ah, well, perhaps I'm expecting too much of you. You're confined to your quarters until Maria leaves. And now is as good a time as any to tell you El Patron is leaving at the same time, and taking me with him." Matt was so stupefied he couldn't speak. He stared at Tomlin. "It had to happen sometime, lad," Tomlin said more kindly. "You're able to look after yourself now. If anything goes wrong, Celia can send a message." He opened the door and Matt was swept up by Celia, who obviously had been waiting on the other side. He couldn't talk to her. As As had happened when he was deeply upset before, the power of speech left him. He was 6 years old again, master of a kingdom of gristle and bone and rotting fruit hidden beneath the sawdust in a little room. Hi, Icy! Hello! I'm glad that you're here! I'm glad you're here, friend! Yeah, we got bots. We got bots. I hate bots. I'm trying to delete the messages as best as I can. I'm trying to delete the messages as best as I can. They're awful. They suck. They are terrible and they suck, so I'm reporting them and trying to get rid of them. I hate bots. The bots are the worst. I'm actually reporting them now. Like, I'm scared of you seeing NSFW. I'm pretty sure it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. I promise it's not that bad. That's why I put it up a rule where you have to put spoilers, so that people wouldn't be super uncomfortable. But don't be scared. Don't be scared. It's fine. It's just NSFW. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. I promise. That's why it's age restricted. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. I'm sorry. I'm full of beans today. I'm all in a good mood. Let's see. I'm gonna get back into it. Chapter 14. Celia's story. Matt was inside his room when Maria left. He heard the hovercraft whine as it prepared to lift off. He heard the whoosh of air and felt the eerie stir on his skin as the anti-gravity vessel passed overhead. He had never traveled in one. El Patron discouraged such things, preferring to keep his farm close to the memory of his youth. As a boy, El Patron had to observe the grand estate of the wealthy rancher who owned this village. He remembered a statue of a winged baby and a fountain tiled in blue-green. He remembered the peacocks that haunted the garden. In every respect, he told Matt, he tried to duplicate that memory. Only, of course, being vastly more wealthy, he could have dozens of statues, fountains, and gardens. The Alacran Estancia was laid out over a large area. No part of the house was taller than 1 story. The walls were a brilliant white, the roofs of fine red tile. Modern conveniences were kept to a minimum. Oh! Lemmy! No! Bad Lemmy! Hold on, I got this. Bad Lemmy! Now's not the time to make noise. I'm reading! Come on now. You've been so good lately. Jeez. Modern conveniences were kept to a minimum, except in special areas like the hospital. Thus, Celia cooked over a wood-burning stove when El Patron was visiting, because he liked the smell of burning mesquite. Other times she was allowed to use microwaves. The gardens were cooled with fine sprays of water, and the rooms, for the most part, depended on shaded verandas to tame the hot desert air. But during the annual party, modern conveniences came out. The famous celebrities would have been miserable without their air conditioning and entertainment centers. Not that El Patron cared whether people were miserable. He merely wanted to impress them. Matt listened for the purr of El Patron's limousine. The young man preferred to travel by road. If it had been possible, he would have gone by horse, but his bones were far too brittle to attempt such a thing. He would sit in the back with Tom Lynn for company. Daft Donald would drive. They would whisk along the long, shimmery highways to El Patron's other house in the Chiricahua Mountains. Matt stood up at the ceiling. He was too depressed to eat or watch TV. All he could do was play out the events of the past few days in his mind. He went over them again and again. If only he hadn't put Tom at the baby table. If only he hadn't made Maria kiss him in front of the others. If only he hadn't gone to the hospital. The regrets piled thickly on one another until Matt's thoughts were running around in his head like a hamster on a wheel. Everyone thought he'd poisoned Furball. His fingerprints were on the bottle. He left a note, a signed note. How dumb can you get? In Maria's room. Matt had to admit the evidence against him was pretty good. Tom must have seen him come out of the pump house and decided to finish the job he started when he dumped Furball into the toilet. But how did Tom use the laudanum without leaving his fingerprints on the bottle? Round and round went Matt's thoughts. Squeak went the wheel of his mind. He heard the limousine start up, the distant slam of a door, and the fading roar of the engine. So El Patron was gone now, and Tomlin. Matt grieved for him. Any rat in the sewer can lie, Tomlin had said. It's how rats are, but a human doesn't run and hide in the dark places, because he's something more. Matt thought he could make Maria understand if he ever got to see her. She'd forgive him because he was a dumb animal and didn't know any better. But Tomlin had called Matt a human, and expected much more from him. Humans, Matt realized, were a lot harder to forgive. Hi, Truck Race! Yes, you're just a little bit on the late side. You're just a little bit on the late side. But we're reading today. I hope you'll be able to catch up when the VOD comes out fully. Well, since I haven't had much time, I hope you had a good day. I'll watch the stream later. Yeah! Please do! The story is great. This is a great story, and I'm butchering it just a little bit because I can't read for anything. I can't orate for anything. But I hope that you're enjoying I hope you enjoy the story. I hope you enjoy the story. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you can't stay too long, but I hope you have a wonderful day. For the first time, he saw a huge difference between the way the bodyguard treated him and how everyone else did. Tomlin talked about courage and loyalty. He let Matt do dangerous things on their expeditions and go off by himself to explore. He treated Matt as an equal. Tomlin often talked to him about his childhood in Scotland, as though Matt were another adult. It wasn't like El Patron's memories, which tend to fall into a rut. Matt had those stories memorized right down to the last word. Tomlin's stories were about the difficult decisions he made to become a man. I was a proper fool, the bodyguard had said. Turned my back on my family, ran with a rough crowd, and did the thing that brought me here. What the thing was, Tomlin never revealed. At the memory of those picnics, tears came to Matt's eyes and rolled down his cheeks. He made no sound. He had learned that safety lay in silence, but he couldn't stop the tears. Yet in the midst of his sorrow, Matt found a glimmer of hope. Someone, out of all the people who thought he was no better than a dog, believed he could be something more. And I will be, Matt promised as he stared up at the blurry ceiling. Not everything was depressing. Tom was banished from the house. Maria, when she was hunting for her dog, had innocently asked her father to look into the hospital. Senator Mendoza wanted to know how she knew about that place. The whole story came out about McGregor's clone and Tom's part in luring Maria to see it. El Patron banished Tom to a year-round boarding school with no holidays. Why doesn't Mr. McGregor take him if Tom's his son? Matt asked. You don't understand, Celia said as she cut cheesecake with fresh raspberries for dessert. Ordinarily, Matt would have demanded 2 slices. Now he didn't even think he could choke down one. Once El Patron decides something belongs to him, he never lets go. Never, said Matt? Never. What about the presents he gets for his birthday? Matt thought of all the gold watches, jewels, statues, and moon rocks people had given him over the years. He keeps it all. Where? Celia dished up the cheesecake and licked her fingers. There's a secret storeroom under the ground. El Patron wants to be buried in it. May the Virgin keep that day away forever. Celia crossed herself. Like, Matt had to think. Like an Egyptian pharaoh? Exactly. Eat your cheesecake, mi vida. You need to keep up your strength. Matt ate mechanically as he imagined the storeroom. He'd seen pictures of King Tutankhamun's tomb. El Patron would lie in a golden box with all the watches, jewels, statues, and moon rocks around him. Then, because Matt didn't want to think of El Patron dying, he said, "What does that have to do with Tom?" Celia settled back in her easy chair. She was much more relaxed now that everyone had left. El Patron thinks a person belongs to him the same way a house or car or statue does, she said. He wouldn't let that person go any more than he'd throw away money. It's why he wouldn't allow Felicia to escape. It's why he keeps everyone under his control so he can call them back in an instant. He'll never let McGregor have Tom, even though he can't stand the boy. Do you and Tom Lynn belong to El Patron? Matt asked. Celia flinched. Caramba! The question you ask. Matt waited. Maybe you wouldn't get into so much trouble if people explained things to you, she said with a sigh. I didn't poison Furball. You didn't mean to, darling. I know your heart is good. Matt badly wanted to argue his case, but he knew Celia wouldn't believe him. His fingerprints were all over the laudanum bottle. I grew up in Atzlan, she began, in the same village where Elpatron was born. It was poor then and it's worse now. Nothing grew there except weeds, and they were so bitter that made the donkeys throw up. Even roaches hitchhiked to the next town. That's how bad it was. As a girl, I went to work in a maquiladora, a factory on the border. All day I sat on an assembly line and put tiny squares into tiny holes with a pair of tweezers. I thought I'd go blind. We lived in a big gray building with windows so small you couldn't put your head outside. That was to keep the girls from running away. At night we climbed the roofs and looked north across the border. Our borders? Asked Matt. Yes, the farm lies between Atzlan and the United States. You couldn't see much because the farms are dark at night, but beyond, where the United States lay, was a great glow in the sky. We knew under that glow was the most wonderful place. Everyone had his own house and garden. Everyone wore beautiful clothes and ate only the best food. And no one worked more than 4 hours a day. The rest of the time, people flew around in hovercrafts and went to parties. Is that true? Asked Matt, who knew almost nothing about the countries bordering the farms. I don't know, Celia sighed. I guess it's too good to be true. Matt helped Celia clear the dishes, and together they washed and dried. It reminded him of those days long ago when they lived in the little house in the poppy field. Matt waited patiently for Celia to pick up the story again. He knew if he pushed her too hard, she stopped talking about her past. I lived in that gray building forever, getting older and older. No parties, no boyfriend, no nothing, she said at last after the dishes were put away. I hadn't heard from my family in years. Maybe they were all dead. I didn't know. The only change in my life happened after I learned to cook. I was taught by an old curandera, a healing woman who took care of the girls. She taught me all kinds of things. I was the best student she ever had, and soon I got off the assembly line and started cooking for the whole building. I had more freedom. I went to the markets to buy herbs and food, and one day I met a coyote. An animal? Matt was confused. No, darling. A man who takes people over the border. You pay him and he helps you go to the United States. Only first you have to cross the farms. Celia shivered. What an idiot I was. Those people don't help you go anywhere. They lead you straight to the farm patrol. I packed everything I owned, including the virgin I had brought from my village. About 20 of us crossed into the Ajo Mountains, and that's where the coyote abandoned us. We panicked like a bunch of scared rabbits. We tried to climb down a cliff, and a woman fell into the gorge and died. We abandoned most of our belongings so we could move faster, but it didn't do us any good. The farm patrol was waiting at the foot of the mountain. I was taken to a room and my backpack was dumped out. Be careful, I cried. Don't hurt the virgin. That's how she got the chip on her robe, when the patrol dumped her onto the floor. They laughed, and one of them was going to crush her with her foot when someone shouted, "Stop!" from the doorway. Everyone snapped to attention then. You better believe it. It was El Patron in his wheelchair. He was stronger in those days, and he liked to check up on things personally. Your accent is familiar. Where are you from? He asked. I told him the name of my village, and he was very surprised. That's my old hometown, he said. Don't tell me the old rat nest is still there. It is, I said, only the rats have moved on to a better slum. He laughed and asked if I had any skills. From that moment on, I belonged to El Patron. I'll always belong to him. He'll never let me go. Matt felt cold. It was good that Celia had crossed over the border, otherwise she wouldn't have been around to care for him. But there was something so bleak about her last words. He'll never let me go. I love you, Celia, Matt said impulsively, putting his arms around her. And I love you, she said softly, hugging him back. It felt so safe then. Matt wished she could hide in her apartment forever and forget about the Alacrans, the scornful servants, and McGregor's clone. What happened to the other people who crossed the border? He asked. Them? Celia's voice was flat and expressionless. They were all turned into Egypts, and she refused to say anything more about it. We have reached the next part of the book, old age 12 to 14. The years are going by so fast. But we'll have to pick up next time, because we are all out of time for today. I hope you are enjoying the story. I hope that you are liking it. And I thoroughly enjoy reading it to you guys. I really do. It's so much fun. I might not be the best at it all the time, but it's a lot of fun when I can get into it and start reading it for you guys. Anywho, I will be seeing you guys on Thursday for the Dream Daddy stream. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully it doesn't mess up. I'm hoping it doesn't mess up. I've been finagling with it to make sure that it works on stream. So I hope that it does. I hope that it does. And I hope that you guys will enjoy it. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Have a happy and lovely Wednesday, and I will see you guys on Thursday for the Dream Daddy stream. I love you all so very much, and remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I love you all so very much, and I'll see you guys on Thursday. You guys take care. Love you all so very much. Mwah, mwah. Bye. Oh, wait, wrong scene. Don't look. How did I mess that up? Bye. Jeez.